All right, let's talk about the digital nomad. It's one of those lifestyles that has completely captured our imagination, right? The ultimate 21st century dream. You know the picture I'm talking about. Someone's typing away on a laptop from a hammock in some amazing place, maybe closing a huge deal from a little cafe in Lisbon. It's this idea of constant travel, constant adventure, all powered by nothing more than a good Wi-Fi signal.
But is that what it's really like? Is it just a permanent vacation with a paycheck? Or, is there a much more complicated story hiding just behind that picture-perfect Instagram post?
Well, we decided to find out. We've been digging through all the latest data, the academic research, and the global trends to really separate the dream from what turns out to be a very surprising reality.
So, first things first, who exactly is the typical nomad? Now, if you're picturing a 22-year-old fresh out of college, maybe backpacking through Asia, you're definitely not alone. But turns out, the data tells a completely different story.
Get this. The average age of a digital nomad is actually 36. Yeah, that's not a gap year. That's a full-blown career.
And when you look closer, it makes perfect sense. The biggest group by far, almost half of them, are in their 30s. And if you add in folks in their 40s and 50s, you quickly realize this isn't some young person's game. This is a movement driven by seasoned, established professionals.
Now it's true, the space is still mostly male, about 85%. But it's worth noting that the number of female nomads has been growing and growing steadily, especially in the last 5 years or so, thanks to some really great communities and mentorship programs out there.
And you can forget that old stereotype of just aimlessly drifting around. An absolutely staggering 90% of nomads have higher education degrees. We're talking about a highly skilled professional workforce, people who specialize in fields like IT, marketing, and high-level consulting.
Okay, so we've kind of busted the myth of who a nomad is, so now let's tackle the other big one, what they actually do. Is it really all about freelancing on your own schedule and having endless free time?
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. You might think freelancing is the most common way to do this, but you'd be wrong. The number one path to becoming a digital nomad is actually being a full-time employee. Almost 40% of them have a traditional job that just lets them work from anywhere. Freelancers, they only make up about 18% of the total.
And all that professionalism, well, it shows up in their paychecks. The average annual income is over $124,000. I mean, that's certainly enough cash to fund that dream lifestyle we're always seeing online. But here's the thing. That money doesn't make the challenges disappear. Behind those glossy photos, nomads are constantly dealing with some very real, very tough hurdles. Things like the practical stress of just finding a stable Wi-Fi connection, to the really heavy emotional weight of loneliness and being isolated on the road.
And that whole idea of a 4-hour work week? Yeah, that's pretty much a myth. A full 78% of them are working 30 hours a week or more. And the biggest chunk of them are putting in a standard 40-plus hour week. They're just doing it with a much better view.
So what we have here is this global tribe of really skilled, high-earning professionals. But is the way they move around the world just a spontaneous, organic thing, or is there something else going on?
Well, research shows that a lot of these destinations aren't just sitting back and waiting for nomads to show up. No, they are actively competing for them, and they're using this powerful strategy that academics have a name for: structural innovation.
So what does that mean in simple terms? It's basically when governments and other big institutions decide to change the rules of the game. They create entirely new systems, things like special visas, tax breaks, huge marketing campaigns, all of it designed specifically to lure this really valuable group of people to their country.
And you can see this whole idea in action right here. Estonia was really the pioneer. They had the first official visa, Portugal's offering a path to actual residency, Colombia has a super low income requirement to get in. This has become a full-on global competition, and these policies are the playbook everyone's using.
So it sounds like a win-win, right? It's a win for the nomad, it's a win for the host country, just a perfect victimless lifestyle. Well, this is where the picture gets much, much more complicated.
Academic research on this really highlights a deep tension. See, while all the marketing talks about freedom and flexibility, the reality on the ground, not just for the nomads, but for the local communities they're living in, can be a very, very different story.
One of the biggest impacts is a process you've probably seen in your own city: urban gentrification. Basically, when a large group of people with high incomes moves into a neighborhood, they drive up demand for housing, especially for those medium-term rentals like Airbnbs. And this influx can have some really serious consequences. Housing that used to be for local families gets converted into short-term rentals. Rents start to skyrocket, which pushes out people who have lived there for years. And slowly, the traditional neighborhood transforms, and that fabric of community life, it can just start to fall apart.
And then there's this other really complex issue that researchers call liquid citizenship. The idea is basically this. Nomads can live in a place using its roads, its parks, its infrastructure, but without actually paying into the local tax system that supports it all. And over time, that can put a real strain on public services for everybody.
Okay, so where does all this leave us? We're faced with this incredibly powerful duality. The whole digital nomad lifestyle isn't a simple utopia, but it's not a complete dystopia either. The truth is, it's kind of both, all at the same time.
On one side of the coin, you have this incredible promise of freedom, flexibility, and experiencing new cultures. But on the other side, you've got these very real risks of gentrification, rising inequality, and the displacement of local communities. The dream and the reality, they exist side by side.
And this leaves us with a really critical question for the future. I mean, the ability to work from anywhere is a massive, massive shift in how we live. So the real question is, how do we harness all the benefits of that shift while also making sure the world it creates is fair and sustainable for everyone, for the people who stay put, as well as for those who are on the move?